All right, it's movie retrospective time once again.
Yeah.
For the third week in a row, and I swear I did not do this on purpose, we're doing a vampire movie.
Yeah.
Because remember we did Fright Night last week, and then we did Twins of Evil the week before that.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to do like 3 vampire movies in a row. I promise.
This one's Lost Boys.
1987.
I haven't seen this in a long time.
It's a classic, man.
87 was the year I graduated from high school.
Yeah.
I'm always getting this one and Fright Night confused.
Well, now you shouldn't do that anymore because we just saw them.
Yeah, no, I still would get it confused.
We watched them on the same night, actually.
I watched them on the same night, and when I first saw them, I saw them kind of close together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Even though they came out like 2 years apart, just about.
Yeah, I still saw them kind of close together. I probably rented them. I didn't see them in the theater or anything, you know. So I kind of get some of the facts jumbled, you know, between the two. And I straighten them back out. Once I straighten them out, I remember. But left to my own devices, I kind of remember these movies as the same movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because they're really, I mean, obviously they're
very
both
different. But
they're both vampire movies. But other than that, there's really not a lot similar to them. You know, they're both like teen-oriented, I guess. But that's pretty much the only similarities. They have
vampires.
They have kind of a different tone. I mean, Lost Boys, I mean, Fright Night, I would call that a horror comedy, even though it had some scary stuff in it. Lost Boys, I guess, is more like a horror adventure, even though it does have some humor in it, too. Although I don't think I would call it a horror comedy straight out.
Fright Night kind of felt like a throwback movie, like something out of E.T. or, you know, some kind of Spielberg movie.
Well, it only came out 3 years after E.T., so.
And Lost Boys felt like a more modern movie that felt like something you might see in 92.
Yeah.
Or 93.
Well, the interesting thing about it, and I think I mentioned this when we were talking about Fright Night, was that prior to Fright Night coming out, I feel like vampire movies, I mean, other than The Hunger, but that was more like a cult film. That wasn't like a big, like, blockbuster or anything like that. I do feel like vampires were, like, seen as, like, creaky, old-fashioned monsters. Because, yes, Anne Rice had written the vampire, you know, the first trilogy of the Vampire Chronicles or whatever, but they hadn't made the movies out of them
yet. The average person really didn't know them.
It was still much, you know, kind of like a scene type of thing.
Right.
So I feel like Fright Night kind of showed that vampires could be done well again, whereas the Lost Boys made vampires cool again. And this was definitely, and I think even Joss Whedon has said this outright, this was definitely the inspiration for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yes, I know it was based on a movie that had Christy Swanson and Pee Wee Herman in it. But the TV show, the tone of the TV show, even some of the characters like Spike and stuff like that from Buffy the Vampire Slayer was taken more or less from the Lost Boys, you know, because it had it had a huge cultural impact, really. I mean, I remember, how old was I in 87? I was probably 16, maybe, 15 or 16.
I was about 18.
Yeah, because I think I had just started high school in 87, and this was huge, like, especially among kind of like goth kids and punk kids and shit like that. This was the first time we had seen anything like this in that kind of genre. I mean, other than that was this big of a hit, you know what I mean? That was like a big cultural phenomenon. Yeah, there'd been like Return of the Living Dead and stuff like that had punks in it. And whatnot,
movie had a very California feel to it.
Oh yeah.
Even though, you know, I don't know where it was. I don't remember where it was set. But
it was shot in Santa Cruz.
Okay. It was
although they weren't allowed to call it that.
It was designed to be kind of like a waterfront, suburban type area, something like maybe like Malibu is what it's supposed to look like, I think. It was pretty cool, you know. It was good. It had a good looking cast, like you said. Everybody was all sexy as a motherfucker. You know, all their outfits and shit for the time. You know, all the vampires looked like something out of Motley Crue or maybe even like looked like something out of Guns N' Roses. You know, you had Ted, or was it Bill?
Yeah,
Bill
Alex Winter.
From Bill and Ted's.
Playing Marco, one of the vampires.
He had long blonde hair, and you had all the Feldmans were in it.
The Feldmans. Yeah. There was only one, but there was.
I thought there was like two.
Well, their Corey was their first name.
Okay.
Corey Haim.
Dude, the Coreys. That's what they were.
Yeah, the Corey Haim and Corey Feldman.
Coreys, yeah. You know, it was just a good flick.
It's real, like I said.
Good sound, good soundtrack.
Oh yeah, and I
really
I had the soundtrack on cassette back in the day, particularly because back in the mid '80s, I was like a huge fan of Echo and the Bunnymen. Fun fact that was also the first band I ever saw live.
Yeah.
So I was a big fan of theirs, and obviously they did a cover of The Doors' "People Are Strange" for this movie.
Yeah. That one song, they still played it at the club down here.
"Cry Little Sister" was probably the biggest, by Gerard McMahon, I think his name is. Gerard or Gerald, I can't remember. McMahon,
pretty epic.
But they've done like a bunch of remixes of it and stuff, and that was kind of like the biggest hit from it. I mean, but this had some great, it had like an NXS song with him, NXS and Jimmy Barnes, who was like another Australian rock singer. Yeah. They had that "Lost in the Shadows" song, which was actually the dude from Foreigner. Did that song too. And the very famous muscle-bound oily saxophone guy, who I didn't realize this until I looked it up later. His name, I think, is Tim Capello. Yeah. At the time that he was in the Lost Boys, he was actually touring with Tina Turner's band. Yeah. So he wasn't like a nobody or anything.
So Sophie saw him live just a couple months back.
Yeah.
Saw him live in Detroit, or in the Detroit area at the goth club there. She called him Muscle Saxophone Man. She took some pictures of him, and she looks just like he did.
It's funny because had he just been in Tina Turner's band, no one would remember him. But because of that 30-second scene in The Lost Boys, now everybody remembers who he is.
He's supposed to be awesome live too. She said he was awesome live.
And what kicks ass? I was doing some research about this because apparently, and I'll get into it in a bit, but there have been some comic books that have continued the story of the Lost Boys. And in some of them, that guy is a major character, which I thought was kind of rad that they kind of wove him into the story that because he was such an iconic part of the movie.
He's unforgettable.
Even though he was only in it for maybe 30 seconds.
Well, you don't expect it. It looks fake.
Yeah.
You don't expect it. You don't expect a bodybuilder to be, musically talented.
Yeah.
The dude was fucking, he's
well,
good.
He did one of the songs on the soundtrack as well. I can't remember the name
he's
of
really
it. Yeah.
good. And Sophie said live, he's fucking blew the doors off. Blew the doors off.
Oh, I bet
he
did.
Says that everybody loved it.
I bet he did.
Yeah.
Like I said, he made a huge impression in this movie because everybody fucking remembers it. Every review I've ever seen of this movie, they mention him particularly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the interesting thing now, if you haven't seen The Lost Boys, this is another one of those movies where it's what the fuck is the matter with you? I mean, even if you didn't grow up in the 80s, which we did, everybody in the 80s that grew up in the 80s saw the fucking Lost Boys. And even it seems subsequently, a lot of younger generations, just because it's such an iconic, it's really one of the most iconic movies of the 80s.
Yeah, but you know what's funny?
What's that?
Watching it a couple days back when we saw this, I haven't seen this since the 80s. I really appreciated the movie.
Yeah.
It was a lot better than I remembered it.
Oh, yeah.
At the time that I saw it, it didn't really make a huge impression.
Yeah.
It was just another one of the movies, you know what I mean, that we watched. It didn't, and like I said, it just kind of blurred together with Fright Night, which back in those days was just another one of the movies. You know what I mean? That's the way I saw them. Well, it was like another one of the decent movies. You know what I mean? It's not like a bad movie that you forget about. Yeah. And it wasn't like a terrible movie that you can't forget. It was just like a movie that you watch and went, yeah, it's pretty good. That's pretty good. Because, I don't know, we were more spoiled back then, I think. I guess,
although
Hollywood was going pretty strong at that time.
I have to say, maybe because of its kind of whole rock and roll narrative, and plus I was very into goth stuff and vampires and that just kind of whole look of it. I think it made a bigger impression. It probably made a bigger impression on me than it made on you, maybe. Because I saw it a million times.
When Interview with the Vampire came out, that one kind of took the fucking crown, and I'd forgotten all about the other vampire movies. But looking at them now, it was about on par. A very different story. Yeah. But about on par with the Interview with the Vampire movie in terms of just quality.
Yeah. Although, like I said, I feel like The Lost Boys had more. It's definitely a horror movie, but it does have a lot more humor in it.
Well, it's like a California kind of rock and roll, California kind of a scene movie.
Yeah, it definitely had that aspect to it.
Right. Guy's mom was cool, and it was just kind of had that kind of like that Spielbergian context to it. Having grown up until the age of about 13 in California, you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
Even back in 87, and I can look at it now. That's the way old California kind of was. Or that was the image it wanted to portray. It wasn't like that everywhere in California. But,
yeah. Well, like I said, if you haven't seen it, just the gist of the story is you have two brothers. They're both teenagers named Michael and Sam, who are played by Jason Patrick, who's the older brother, and Sam, who's played by Corey Haim, the younger brother. Their mom, Lucy, played by Diane Wiest, who, fun fact, had just won an Oscar for Woody Allen's Hannah and Her Sister. That was a Woody Allen movie, wasn't it? Hannah and Her Sisters. Yeah, she had just won an Oscar for that, and was apparently really excited to be in a horror movie. So I thought that was pretty neat. So she plays their mom. She just got divorced and she's broke. She lost her job and everything like that. So she's moving to this town, this beachside town, Santa Carla, to move back in with her eccentric dad, grandpa, who lives in like this weird old cabin with like all these like animals that he has stuffed, like beavers and whatnot. And he kind of looks like a really old hippie, but also with a little bit of a Charles Manson kind of Leatherface kind of flair, I guess. I don't know.
Not as bad as Bruce Dern, though.
No, that's true. He's not quite as crazy, but along that same continuum.
Yeah.
So they're moving to this fictional town, Santa Carla. But like I said, if anybody's from, California, you will recognize the boardwalk and everything immediately, because particularly there's one roller coaster there called the Dipper or something like that that's really, really famous. And it is Santa Cruz. Now, apparently they really wanted to shoot this in Santa Cruz, but because of this whole thing, the fictional town in the movie, it's like supposed to like the murder capital of the world. Santa Cruz was like, yeah, not so much. We don't really want that kind of reputation, even though it was true, because at that time when they filmed that, Santa Cruz had like 30 serial murders. There was Edmund Kemper, and there was a couple other serial killers running around at that time. So there were a lot of murders going on in this place.
California was the Florida of the 80s.
Yeah. So, but, understandably, they said when they did, like, the contract for, like, the locations shooting and stuff, they said you can shoot it here, but you can't call it Santa Cruz. You have to call it something else. So they called it Santa Carla. So they moved there. The older brother, Michael, starts falling in with a crowd of a local biker gang, I guess you could call him, because he's fallen in love with this girl, Star, that he sees on the pier. And it turns out, spoiler alert, that this biker gang are all vampires, and slowly start turning Michael into one as well.
Yeah, and being a writer myself, these are not what you would actually call bikers, though.
Well,
to be a biker, you actually have to have Harleys. These guys just riding supermotos.
Yeah.
So they were kind of like cyclists.
Vampires.
They were a little gang of They were a little gang that had motorcycles.
Yeah.
Yeah. They weren't bikers, though.
Yeah. I should also mention, too, that also in here, like I said, when the whole vampire shenanigans start to occur, there are also two brothers, the Frog brothers, Edgar and Alan, whose hippie parents, who are perpetually stoned and sleeping, own this big, famous comic book store. And these two know that Santa Carla is full of vampires, and they style themselves kind of like vampire killers, and are trying to recruit Sam into their like vampire killing business. Yeah, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw that back in like '87. I actually liked those characters best out of the whole movie.
They were,
because that was kind of the shit that me and my buddies would do.
Yeah, it was very relatable.
Yeah.
And like I said, the funny thing about it too, well, one, I have to say that the director, Joel Schumacher, which I'll get into that in a minute too, but he basically told the Frog Brothers, he's like, I want you guys, like, they're teenagers, but he's like, I want you guys go watch all the Sylvester Stallone and Chuck Norris movies, because I want you guys to be like Rambo, or like Rambo and Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
He wanted them to be like, but like, he's like, play it completely straight, like, not funny or anything like that, but you're just completely serious about you were a vampire killing badass. Yeah. And like, you really do think that. So it works really well, like from a comedic point of view, because they take it very seriously.
Yeah, they're wearing like 60s, 70s, and 80s army gear.
Yeah.
One of them's got fucking Vietnam Tiger Stripe, Special Forces Tiger Stripe, camo and shit. Army Ranger stuff. Yeah. One guy's got a fucking Army Ranger outfit on.
And a lot of it's interesting too, because a lot of the like later comic book series that were spun off of this movie, there's a whole series just called like the Frog Brothers or something like that that's about them.
Yeah.
And they were actually characters in the later sequels too, which we'll get into a little bit too. Now, one thing that I found very interesting about The Lost Boys, when it was first conceived. The woman that wrote the original screenplay, that was her and this writing partner of hers that she had, and their idea, and the reason that it's called The Lost Boys, is because they were doing a riff on Peter Pan. They got into a discussion about, you know how Peter Pan, he only appears at night, he can fly, and he never grows old. And then the writing partner was like, oh, that's, and joked maybe, oh, it's because he's a vampire.
Right.
So the woman that wrote the original screenplay was like, hey, that's a really good idea. And she really liked the idea of like child vampires. So the original conception of the movie was the vampires, the Lost Boys, the gang, they were only supposed to be like 12 or 13 years old.
Okay.
And the Frog Brothers, who were fighting them, were only supposed to be 8. They were supposed to be like two Cub Scouts.
Oh, okay.
This was supposed to be more like the Goonies.
Right.
Because the Goonies had just come out like a year or two before, and it was like hugely successful. Yeah. And the first drafts of the screenplay, they actually tried to get Richard Donner, who directed the Goonies. They wanted him to direct it because it was supposed to be like kid vampires.
Because in the movie, the Frog Brothers are probably more like 16, 17.
Yeah, they're more like middle teenage years. And then the gang are obviously
20s.
Like supposed to be like in their late teens or early 20s, even though probably the actors were a bit older, but they're supposed to be like older teenagers.
Okay.
Or in their early 20s. But then it kind of got, as the, script kind of got worked on and shit like that. I mean, the original script did, like, result in a bidding war. So people did really want it. But when it got bought, I believe it was by Warner Brothers, and they started shopping it around to different directors. I think Mary Lambert, who directed Pet Sematary, she was attached at one point. And it might have been her idea or somebody else's idea that's like, can we go a little bit older? To make them older teenagers, that would be a better story and shit like that. So, the production company thought that was a better idea. And then they decided, because, like I said, originally Richard Donner was going to direct it, but then he decided to go and direct Lethal Weapon. So they actually got Joel Schumacher, who he has kind of a bad reputation now, mostly because of Batman and Robin, which was a terrible, terrible movie.
Yeah, by pretty much any measure.
But you have to think, this was before that had happened. He had just made St. Elmo's Fire, which was hugely successful. He did Falling Down. He did Flatliners a couple years later, which we reviewed. So he had done some good films. He hadn't started going down the toilet.
Although, in his defense, there wasn't much he could do with Batman and Robin.
True.
Based on what they were asking him to do. And and then all the characters that they gave him to work with. I mean, how the hell are you going to make a movie out of all that?
And the thing about, I guess I know it's easy to just point the finger at one person, like the director. Yeah. And yes, the director is in charge of how the movie's going to come out and shit like that. But movies are a collaborative effort between hundreds and hundreds of people.
And then they had Arnold in there, and Arnold was contractually he could not be a villain, but they had him as Mr. Freeze,
who's a villain.
So how do they fulfill that? How do they make Mr. Freeze a good guy?
Yeah,
which I guess they kind of did at the end. It just
I've blocked most of because even now
he switched sides at the very end, and then
I've seen it, but it's now it's I just see clips of it, and I'm just like, oh god, that movie was so bad. It was so bad.
Yeah.
But like I said, this was prior to that happening. So Joel Schumacher's name wasn't mud at this point. So he actually did turn in a decent movie, and it was his idea. Like I said, they'd already had the idea to make the vampires older and make the Frog Brothers older. But he was kind of okay, well, I want to sexy it up. I want the vampires to be really cool. I want everybody in this movie to be really good looking. So for some of the vampire gang, he got some of them were models and shit like that. Actually, for the character of Star, he wanted to get, initially he wanted quote unquote a blonde waifish woman. But when they cast Jason Patrick as Michael, he had just worked with Jamie Gertz on Solar Babies, and he kind of had a little bit of a crush on her. So he's like, hey, why don't you put her in the movie? So she came and auditioned, and they put her in the movie. Kiefer Sutherland, I believe he was asked outright to be the main vampire, David, because...
This is one of his best movies, actually, if you ask me.
He is foxy as shit in this, I have to say.
And the guy playing opposite to him, the good guy, what was his name?
Michael, Jason Patrick, the actor.
Yeah, you can tell that they're trying to get you to draw a connection between this guy and Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison. There's a lot of Jim Morrison.
They got the same haircut. They show him with that haircut, and then they fucking cut back and look at old Kiefer Sutherland, and behind him in the background is
a
poster with
Jim Morrison
with that same haircut. They're trying to get you to, and then they're playing Doors songs and stuff.
Yeah.
They try to get you to think that the main character is Jim Morrison, and he kind of does evoke Jim Morrison.
He does a bit, yeah.
His walk and stuff, and yeah.
Well, like I said, they were really trying...
They wanted a Jim Morrison-ish kind of character.
Yeah, because you have to think... I remember particularly in the late 80s, a lot of that kind of 60s music, particularly the Doors and Pink Floyd and stuff like that, was making a big, huge comeback, because I remember a lot of dudes in my high school...
Yeah, we used to listen to it.
Going way back and, listen to that stuff.
Most of the Doors, it was almost like the original goth band in a certain way.
It was, yeah.
And the Velvet Underground.
Oh, yeah. But I definitely remember being in high school and a lot of people wearing tie-dye and having Jim Morrison shirts and Jimi Hendrix shirts and stuff like that. I love Hendrix. Yeah, so that was a big thing at that time.
Some of the darker Rolling Stones stuff, it was good.
But there was a lot of that going around.
Yeah, there was some kind of proto-goth going on in the 60s.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
But so Kiefer Sutherland, like I said, I think he'd only been... He was in At Close Range, which I think was where Joel Schumacher had seen him and, asked him to be in this movie because he thought he'd make a really good villain. And just prior to this, he had done Stand By Me, who he also played a villain in that. He played Ace Merrill, I think. It was the bully or whatever. So this was one of his, very early roles. And like I said, he looks great in this movie. I mean, yes, this movie is very 80s. I guess it doesn't... It does scream 80s to me, but maybe not as much as it would to somebody that didn't grow up in the 80s. Because I remember when people used to wear that kind of shit. I remember when this was...
Very late 80s, though.
I remember when this was cool, when, kind of punk rocky people had Kiefer Sutherland's kind of hair, even though nowadays it's a mullet. It's essentially a mullet.
Towards the end of the 80s, you started... towards the end of the 80s, you started seeing stuff like punk rock and certain kinds of hard rock and metal kind of
merging together.
Yeah. If you looked at Motley Crue, early Motley Crue, it kind of looked goth. If you looked at, you started to see shades of damn Guns N' Roses and things, and they kind of had a little bit of
very
a punk
glam.
but it was kind of blended together in the damn same thing. And that went on all the way through the early '90s, and really. To me, I watched the movie the other time. The last time I saw it, I realized how early '90s it looked.
Yeah,
because that started to become more mainstream in the first half of the '90s, with kind of like the underground scene.
I did. Yeah, I think I do remember when I was saying before. I think I said on one of our other shows or reviews or something like that about how I feel like in the early '90s when alternative music or punk music and stuff like that started to go mainstream, yes, it seemed like it happened really quickly, but I think it might have started in the mid to late 80s. And I think this movie might have been another peg along that route.
And you look at this movie kind of visually, the palette and everything, and just the way this movie is edited, and it kind of reminds me of a bit of Flatliners. And that's 90s.
Well, it's the same director.
Same director?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I called it.
Yeah, it's the same director.
That's why. So this kind of style went. What's the name of the director again?
Joel Schumacher.
Schumacher. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you could definitely tell.
Yeah.
You could definitely tell, because I was watching it and I was like, man, this reminds me a lot of Flatliners the way it looks. Because it's a pretty movie. Flatliners is gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
And so this one looks good too.
Yeah, the lighting in this one is really cool and everything. So there's a lot of scenes filmed by firelight, and there's everything's foggy and
And he tries to. He's kind of doing things where he's kind of evoking kind of damn the look of stained glass, even though it may not be stained glass. It might be posters in the background. But later on in Flatliners, instead of posters, it would be like stained glass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The way he puts something in the background. Colors in the background, it's just the way he does stuff, and it's in a dark room with damn candle lit room, or orange light or red light.
Yeah, it's a very warm color palette.
Yeah, so it's a cool palette. I like the way both those movies look.
Yeah, this one in particular, it's almost I guess he did a warm. He's trying to evoke fire, the whole beachy thing, blood, all that kind of stuff. So he did really seem to think about how he wanted it to look, and I have to say too that the underground lair that the vampire gang lives in, which, you know, Kiefer Sutherland, whose character is named David, he explains in the course of the movie that this used to be like some big, like, fancy hotel or resort or something back on the beach, like he says 80 or 85 years ago, and it fell into a crack during an earthquake, and now there's like the ruin of it is kind of underground in this cave, and they live in it. And that whole... that was one of my favorite things about the movie, because I said, oh man, I wish I had a big fucking underground layer like that that I could fucking live in and shit. Now that was actually a set. That was a set, and Grandpa's cabin was a set. The rest of the shit was filmed just around Santa Cruz, you know, on the boardwalk and, you know, just other locations. I think that didn't... Jordan Peele's Us, I'm pretty sure they also shot that on the Santa Cruz boardwalk. As an homage to the Lost Boys, I think they did.
Well, all I know is that I didn't quite appreciate the movie when it came out, and it was probably because I saw it on television, on a VHS tape through a CRT screen. But you look at it now on Blu-ray quality on a good screens that we have today. This is how it would have looked in the theater. It looks good. It looks really good, and the writing's good. The way the story goes.
It's like I said. It has. I think that one of the best things about it, like I said, it has like a lot of comedic moments, particularly with Corey Haim's character and the Frog Brothers, who are very funny, even though, like I said, they play everything straight. So there's like funny shit in it, but it's not a comedy.
No, it's just something about the tone that those directors could evoke back then that it's kind of lacking today. I don't know. It's
a hard thing to get right, because I mean, I saw
a mixture of so many elements coming in together, and they're not doing it all like they used to. Yeah, they do it differently now.
I mean, I did see some movies in the 80s that tried to kind of strike that balance and also failed. Yeah, like I said, it's a very difficult thing to get. It's a hard, you know, look at something like Gremlins, which is funny, but also kind of scary. It's kind of like a monster movie, and it's kind of like dark and shit like that. That's a very hard tone to get right.
Yeah, but it's also kind of colorful.
Yeah.
And it may have had something to do with the film stock that they used and the cameras that they used. There's definitely the lighting, but there's something about... And then how they dressed everyone. Yeah. You know what I mean? Everyone's costumes or what they were wearing is really well planned out for all these shots. I mean, nothing's by accident. Everything in those... In movies like this is just kind of orchestrated to evoke a certain emotional reaction that you don't really get until you see it on the big screen, or you see it in really good HD quality on these new screens that we have now. But it just in VHS in a little aspect ratio,
everything looked like ass.
It looked terrible when I saw it. So when you seeing it now, you know, streaming through that big fucking TV, good TV that we have, it looks great. I mean, you know, I didn't realize what I was missing. You know. You didn't get that experience back in the 80s unless you went to the movies. Yeah. Now
this, Fright Night I did not see in the theater. Lost Boys I did. I did see Lost Boys in the theater. And then subsequently, like, I saw it a bunch of more times because I think I bought it on VHS or I taped it off HBO or something like that. So this is another one. I don't think I saw it quite as many times as Fright Night, but almost. Because when we watched it again, I remembered pretty much every single scene and every single line from this fucking movie. Now, apparently... And I haven't seen them, so I'm not going to comment. I'm just going to tell you what other people have said. There were 2 sequels to this. Now, I should say that actually Joel Schumacher, because this movie was actually very successful, it only cost $8.5 million to make, ended up making $35 million at the box office and then another $14 million on home video. And it was actually, I think, the most rented movie of 1988, or one of the top 10 most rented movies of 1988. So it was a big deal. So Joel Schumacher wanted to make a sequel, and it was going to be called The Lost Girls. David's character, Kiefer Sutherland, was actually going to reprise his role because he was going to argue, well, at the end of the first Lost Boys, yes, he got impaled on the antlers, but it didn't go through his heart, so he could have lived. He didn't blow up or anything like some of the other vampires did. So they were going to bring him back, but now he was going to be in with like another biker gang, but they were all going to be girls. So it was going to be a similar thing, but they were going to bring back, you know, the Frog Brothers and everything like that. But it never worked out. They said they worked on it for years and years, like for a couple years after the first Lost Boys came out, and it just never came to fruition. It was in development hell and shit like that. But then, 20 years later, they made a sequel that went direct to DVD. And it was called The Lost Boys, The Tribe. The only recurring character was Corey Feldman. who reprised his role as one of the Frog Brothers. And I have heard it was not very good. I have not seen it. But it looked a lot like, people that have seen it, they're like, well, it just looked like a modern vampire. Like, it looked like Twilight, or like they were trying to evoke Twilight. So it wasn't really all that successful.
It's like I was saying, they
yeah.
And another thing that they'll do is they'll try to make things look too realistic.
Yeah.
And it just kind of spoils going to a movie. There's something about a movie. A movie's very much like a theater production is what it's supposed to be, you know. So our generation just kind of enjoyed that kind of weird theatrical, almost kind of artificial look.
Although I have to say that the practical effects in Lost Boys are actually really good. Like, all the fangs are good. Like, they had all the really cool contacts. They all looked really awesome.
I'm talking about the lighting and the colors. Yeah. That's not normal.
Yeah.
You don't walk around in real life and see shit like that.
I wish.
Yeah. Because you could tell that everything was kind of laid out by an interior decorator and somebody who knew everything about camera lighting.
Yeah.
And everything looked beautiful. The reality isn't like that.
Well,
you put a camera in just a random place somewhere on the earth, it just looks boring, gray.
Well, yeah. Why do you think the original Suspiria is one of my favorite movies ever? Because it's just like visually orgasmic. Yeah. It's like you could just, I don't even have to have the fucking volume on. I could just look at it.
Yeah. Everything looks like something off
because it's so beautiful looking.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of these movies today, they look like they're actually happening.
Yeah.
And that just kind of.
Which that's the thing, but like I said, I kind of like. I guess in the indie world, like, and I keep bringing up that movie, The Lighthouse, but it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, you can see, like, people are trying to do other things with it, so you don't just have
that
things
that obviously wasn't happening either. Just the aspect ratio, everything was black and white. It just, you could tell it was on grainy film stock, like old-fashioned shit.
It was, yeah. I think they shot it on 16 millimeter.
Reality doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
And if you were just standing there watching that happen, those guys in the lighthouse doing that shit wouldn't give you the same impact.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But, wouldn't have the
same impact.
Okay, so either because the movie wasn't good, or because it went to DVD, or because they waited 20 fucking years, like, to make a sequel to The Lost Boys. Lost Boys: The Tribe, like I said, it's got pretty shitty reviews. However, it only cost $4 million to make, and it made $8 million back. So, of course, they made a third one called The Lost Boys: The Thirst. And they actually got Corey Feldman back for that one, and the other guy that played, I can't remember the, Jamison Newlander, that's the other actor's name, the other actor that played the other Frog Brother. All right. So they were both in the third one. I've heard the third one was slightly better than the second one, but still not that great, and it didn't really do all that well. However, as I said, there have been at least one, maybe two, like, comic book, series that were, have spun off of the movie. One of them is actually, the artwork in it is like really, really gorgeous. And like I said, they even like, they have another character that's like, that was sired by David, and the Frog Brothers come back in it. Like I said, the oily saxophone guy is like a main character.
The oily saxophone.
So I thought that was kind of cool that they incorporated him into the story, so he wasn't just like some random guy playing saxophone on a stage on the beach. I thought that was kind of neat. But yeah, so you know what I mean? It's like, this is one of those movies that it was probably one of the formative movies of my teenage years. Like I said, I think this came out the first year that I was in high school. And I went and saw it in the theater, and I loved it. I mean, I had the soundtrack on cassette. I had like posters from it and shit like that. I thought Kiefer Sutherland was just like super, super cool in this. And it's like, I just wanted to be a vampire and live in that big and fucking cave and all this other kind of shit. It's just, there was so much about it, especially at that time period.
Yeah, I was a senior at that time. I was in Brazil, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was so much about it that just like struck a chord.
Right.
Like with people my age.
Well, it was a special movie. It's one of a kind. It was its own thing. Kind of like, it's hard to duplicate that magic. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you can't duplicate Terminator 1. You can't duplicate Predator 1. You know
well, it's just because... You just can't. And I think that it's the that people have a hard time doing that, because when is any sequel... as good as the first one? It hardly ever is. It's like there's maybe less than a handful of examples.
They're bad ideas. If you want to destroy a good idea, make a sequel to it.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's just.
But it's a cash grab.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay. It's just
They want
the allure of the money is just they're like, this made so much money. It's like, even if it only makes half of that much money, that's still a lot of money.
Imagine if they wanted to do Titanic 2. Okay, how do we have
how do we bring the ship back up from the bottom of the ocean?
Think of that. Yeah. How do we bring the Titanic?
Do you know? I would bet you a substantial sum of money that meeting happened.
Oh, sure.
That somebody at least brought it up.
Sure. And that would have destroyed Titanic 1's that would have destroyed its reputation.
I mean,
they'd have been like, "Oh, fuck Titanic."
I mean, obviously it didn't get made yet, but it might.
Titanic 2.
But
The Rising.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say.
They sent some people down there to bring it up, and then they're falling in love, and then they die at the end trying to raise the raising of the Titanic.
I would bet $500 that was at least brought up at a meeting somewhere. Even if everybody else at the meeting was like, nah, bro.
No, don't do it. Don't do it.
That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Yeah. But I kind of feel like they don't say that enough, though, because... They don't care. Well, here's the thing. I've seen some movies, like I've seen a lot of great movies too, and like I said, I'm not like a negative person. I don't really like to like shit on movies, especially if I haven't seen them and stuff like that. But there are some movies out there that you're like, wow, I can't believe a movie with that concept actually got made, that they actually like put millions of dollars into that and stuff like that. So I always wonder if those actually got made, what were the ones that didn't get made?
Oh man.
Were they good or were they even worse than that?
I don't know.
See, this is what I kind of suspect that they were probably good movies, and then people were just like, no.
Yeah.
Let's make Volcano Tarantulas 3 The Quickening. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, let's make that.
Yeah.
Instead. And then, like, here's, like, this...
Well, look what they did. Look what they did to the Highlander property.
True.
Highlander 1 was all right. They should have just left it the fuck alone.
Yeah.
And then it started to make less and less sense and get more and more ridiculous, because Highlander 1 was ridiculous enough, really, when you think about it.
Yeah. And like you said, it's just hard to recapture.
Yeah.
It's like, I can almost understand when they made The Lost Boys, for example, 87. It was very successful. It kind of became kind of a cultural meme. Like I said, people still remember shit. The vampire movie What We Do in the Shadows from 2014 directly referenced a scene from this movie. So it's still obviously like a big cultural touchstone. So I can see maybe a year or two later them talking about making a sequel. I'm not saying it was a good idea. I'm just saying I can see that. The weird thing to me is that they made a sequel 20 years later.
They were
20 years later.
Running out of shit to do.
It just seems like if you're going to do a sequel,
they should have done it right away.
You should do it right away, like a year or two later.
Yeah.
3 years max.
But that movie would have taken a long time to make.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the level of filmography, the photography of the thing, it was visually, it looked cool, and you had to write a good story, and I think that director went on to do something right after this, didn't he? I mean,
I can't remember which one. Well, he did Flatliners 3 years after this, so I'm not sure if it was his next project or if there was another one in there in between.
Probably went right on to Flatliners.
I think it might have been Flatliners, and maybe that's why, because he liked working with Kiefer Sutherland so much that that he got him in Flatliners. He was very good in that too.
Remember the Doors movie?
Yeah.
What year did that come out? Late 80s or early 90s? I think that might have been
92.
Was it 92?
I want to say 91, 92. I think I had just got out of high school.
Imagine if they tried to do a sequel to that.
Zombie Jim Morrison. We'll bring him back from the dead. I'm sure that was discussed also.
Yeah.
Now
how are we going to bring Jim back?
You know what? We should do a whole entire episode. I'd have to think about it for a while. We should do a whole entire episode of like movies that totally shouldn't have sequels, but we'll like pitch a sequel for a movie that totally shouldn't have a sequel.
Right, yeah. So
that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
But I would have to like think about it for
like Brazil.
Right. It's like like anything that it's like, no, there's no possible way they could make a sequel to this movie.
Yeah.
But we'll think of one.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like I would love that. Now I'm gonna like now I'm gonna go like I'm gonna go.
You got to come up with a story outline of
that's what I'm saying.
It's
even if it's just like an elevator pitch. It's just it doesn't have to be like a whole outline. It could just be like a couple sentences of just like this happens. Like I said, with the Titanic, like a Titanic thing. It's ridiculous, but. What
sequel to Romeo and Juliet?
Right. Yeah. It's like, what if somebody said, "I'll give you $30 million to write a sequel to Titanic, or to write a sequel to the Doors movie, or something like that," and you have to come up with something.
Right.
What would you come up with?
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. I love this.
sequel to the Yellow Submarine. That wasn't even a movie in itself.
That was not really. It was just kind of like a series
just the
of
Beatles
weird
getting high
vignettes inspired by acid.
Yeah.
Which didn't really make any narrative sense.
No.
But yeah, so holy crap, I know what the conversation's going to be like for the rest of the day. I'm just going to be coming up with movies that totally shouldn't have sequels. Yeah. Like I said, this one seemed like, you could expand that universe because Santa Carla, the town, was supposed to be like overrun with vampires. Yes, they killed the head vampire. Yes, they killed some of the gangs, but there could have been other ones because there was like a lot of murders and there was a lot of kids missing and shit like that. So that universe could be expanded. And like I said, they did it with the comic books and whatnot. But I don't know. The first movie was just so iconic with the cast, particularly the soundtrack. It's like the whole look of it. You just can't recapture that, like you said. Yeah. And I think that's hard to do for any movie that made such a big like cultural impact, and particularly something that's so like emblematic of the year that it came out. I mean, this is so 87.
I think that's why movies are going to vanish. It's either going to be a video game or it's going to be a series. Because it's hard to make a story like this happen in a 2-hour time frame. Everything's been done already.
Pretty much.
I've
always been of the opinion that if you're going to like adapt something to a movie, I think it's better to adapt a short story to movie length.
Yeah.
If you're going to adapt a novel, you need a series.
You need a series, right.
Because otherwise you're just taking so much shit out, and it's just like, what's the point of it? Yep. Like, make it into a series, even a mini-series. It could just be like 3 or 4 episodes or something like that. But I think short stories would work better as movies, if you're just going to adapt it.
Yeah.
Because that's what you need to do. It's just kind of like...
That's why Dark Tower sucked so bad. How the hell are you going to get that book into a damn movie?
And like I said, I mean, that's a whole series of books. That's not even just one book.
Yeah, but even that first book, you couldn't put that into one movie.
No, there's just
that movie
no
would be 8 hours long.
And I think, like I said, this is probably a situation where they call up some poor screenwriter and was like, hey, we want to turn The Dark Tower into a movie. And he's like, are you shitting me? And they're like, no, seriously, you have to do it. We'll give you $30 million. And he's like, okay, I'll come up with something.
Yeah, or they turn The Talisman into a movie.
Into it, yeah.
Yeah, imagine
that. See, like I said, there's just some of that shit, there's just no way you could do it.
Yeah.
There's just no way you could do it. But like I said, if you're going to adapt something, adapt a short story.
Yeah.
But, So, vampire movies in the 80s. Like I said, we covered one last week, Fright Night, which everybody needs to see. You also need to see this one. This is like the rock and roll vampire movie in the 80s. And
it's a must-see, really.
And, spawned a lot of the kind of cool vampire shit that came later, particularly Buffy the Vampire Slayer and some of the other vampire series that everybody
will make, if you're from that era, it will make you want to jump in the damn TARDIS and go back in time. Yeah, I remember that.
It kind of does, yeah.
I remember when the world was like that.
Yeah, because this is very, like I said, this is very...
pre-internet and all that.
Nostalgic for that, because I remember when people dressed like that. I remember...
No cell phones.
I remember having that soundtrack. I remember that whole gestalt of the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, seriously.
Comic book stores from back in the day.
Oh, you know what? I read that was a real comic book store that they filmed that in. It got destroyed 2 years later in an earthquake.
Okay.
Although the owner reopened it somewhere else.
Right.
So, and he still has that cover that said vampires everywhere. He's like, that wasn't a real comic book.
You remember that pre-internet era when people were very easily entertained?
Yeah.
They could just go walk around.
And we did.
Yeah.
What else was there to do?
Go drink and make a little campfire and try to have group sex underneath some bridge somewhere.
And not succeed.
Yeah.
Well.
You got people fucking watching out for the cops.
Yeah, let's all sit under here and smoke some weed and that's sneaking some alcohol out of your parents' cabinet.
Yeah, or just hiring the winos to go buy it. We had balls. Say, hey man, go. Oh yeah, we'll hook you up. I'll hook you up. Get you.
You guys actually hired winos.
Hired the damn winos to go do it, man.
That's very enterprising.
Fucking right. Yep, go hire the winos.
They knew all the best places.
Yep. You walk up to them like that and you go, you looking for something? Yeah, we're looking for something. And then you go, what do you want? Because I want some MD-2020. Okay, you get that. No, they wanted hard liquor. Okay, you get that, but get us this, and then get get yourself a Swisher Sweet, and shit like that.
Because
they want a pack of cigarettes, and then, all right, I got it. I'll be back. I'm going to be here next week, that kind of stuff. Yeah, you make a run for you. He goes, I want you hiding over there.
That's pretty sweet. I never even thought of doing that.
Yeah, you gotta find an honest bum.
Like a dumbass, we always try to just find the oldest person, the oldest looking person.
See, the mistake a lot of dudes made back then is that they would walk up on those bums in a crowd. 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah.
And it attracts too much attention.
Yeah.
You got to send one kid up to him and say, hey, man, you want to make some money?
Well, yeah, if they get a whole gang of kids coming up, they think they're going to get their ass kicked.
Well, no, not only that, it's just there's too many damn witnesses, and people are watching, and it might be a cop sting or something,
Yeah.
It's just one kid, and you're cutting it, and you're always taking the risk that they'll rip you off, but we never got ripped off.
See?
We never got ripped off.
Honest hobos.
Yep.
That's what I mean. That's pretty rad, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you're looking for something. Because they're hanging out there.
Well, the thing is, they probably hang out at those same places, and it's if they fuck people over,
then they don't get score again. We had a regular guy.
Exactly.
We had a guy. We probably hit that dude about 5-6 times,
and they'll get their ass kicked probably because people will see them in the same spots all the time.
Yep.
So
you just have to go to know what part of town to go to.
There's no incentive for them.
You can't do that in the good part of town. You got to go to the rough part of town where the winos are. That's where you go to where the winos are hanging.
Where the winos are.
Yeah.
Oh boy, we're just
you gotta have money. You get them to buy them cigarettes and cigars, and that way they can restock themselves. Yeah. Then they go turn around and sell.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win. Then they're gonna sell some of that too.
Yeah.
But
I like it.
But you had 5-6 guys, chipping in $20 each. We had money.
Yeah.
So he'd go in there and make a big old score.
Nice.
He goes, I'll meet you over there. I'll meet you over there with it. Okay. You gotta talk like that. I'll meet you over there in the parking lot.
That hobo sounds kind of like your dad.
Not my dad.
That's kind of like when you do your dad's voice. That's a little bit what your dad sounds like.
My dad is more like, I saw oblivion. Well, my dad just sounded like that because they had pulled his heart out.
Well, yeah, and replaced it with turkey necks.
Replaced it with turkey necks. Yeah.
For all you regular listeners out there, if you've just tuned in, you have no idea what we're talking about.
I ain't gonna make it. Where's my gun? He was one trying to fight his way out the hospital.
It was going to be a hostage situation.
He thought he'd been abducted. He was kind of going in and out. So they got to go. Where's my truck?
He was trying to escape. Aww.
Yeah. It's drugs.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. All right, wrap it up, Jenny.
All right, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Go see The Lost Boys if you haven't seen it. You may rent it for YouTube on $3.99, just like we did. And so we'll see you next time. Bye. What? Bless you.
Stuck her nose in the box and started sniffing.